morning, everyone. We're going to kick off. Aloha, my name is Crystal Ka'ai. I'm the Executive Director of the White House Initiative on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. And I want to thank you all for joining today's panel, where we are going to be centering the importance of state and local policy making and the work that we do together with our state and local elected officials through the federal government. We have a very fantastic lineup this morning, and we're going to kick off with a special armchair discussion with Neera Tandon and Mayor Aftab Piraval from Cincinnati, Ohio. And then after that, we will be hearing from several state elected officials on a second panel. So again, we're really excited for all of you to be here with us this morning for this really historic summit as we celebrate and kick off Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And so also for our audience, this event will be recorded so that we will be able to also share this online with viewers who are unable to attend in person today. So next, I have the honor of introducing Neera Tandon, who serves as Senior Advisor and Staff Secretary to President Biden and has been just a longtime champion, has such a long history working in community as well as in various roles, both inside and outside of government. So Neera, I'm going to turn it over to you to moderate our next session. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Excellent. I'm really honored to be here. I'm really excited at the fact that we are pulling together this day, this historic day. And as Senior Advisor to the President and Staff Secretary, I really feel privileged to serve in an administration that has really prioritized advancing equity for all of our communities and really has given a great voice to Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. I am also proud to be a first-generation Indian American and really lucky to be a part of an administration that has such high levels of representation. In fact, the administration has an unprecedented 14% of our appointees and nominees identify as AAA NHPI, and obviously including our very own Vice President Kamala Harris. I wanted to just highlight a few of our priorities and accomplishments. Earlier this year, the administration released the first ever national strategy for advancing equity, justice, and opportunity for Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. This comprised 32 federal agencies, which developed a national strategy to make needed investments in our communities. And additionally, we passed the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act, which, was a remarkable event, a very bipartisan piece of legislation very early in the administration. It was meant to tackle a real and deep challenge in our communities, the increased hate and violence we've seen. And I'm proud that the Department of Justice has really taken this on. We have an anti-hate resource coordinator, its first full-time language access coordinator, and this is a top priority for the administration. So while we are forced to deal with tragedies, I am proud of how the community and our elected leaders have come together to try to address these challenges. So these are just a few of our accomplishments. We recognize, again, we recognize the importance of having representation in all parts of our government. I am honored to serve with President Biden, and I can say that ensuring that all communities are represented is a really top priority for him. This is my third White House, and I started in the Clinton administration. And when I was in the Clinton administration, I hate to age myself, but when I was in the Clinton administration, all the Asian Americans who worked in the White House could fit very well in one room. We had a picture with us with President Clinton, I remember, towards the end of the administration. And, we took up really like a third of the Oval Office. And now Asian Americans just at the White House are a really large percentage. And many of the president's closest advisors his top speechwriter, the head of OSTP, Office of Science Technology Policy, myself, many others, Erica, of course. We have representation all throughout the White House. And I think that speaks to a lot of the political maturation of the community, but also speaks to essentially an understanding that our voices really matter. And that's why today is so important, and why my guest is so important, or not my guest, our guest is so important, Mayor Puraval, who I met many, many years ago, and I've been a fan ever since. But he is mayor of Cincinnati in Ohio. He has been a transformational leader who's led on many issues, just recently on gun violence. But he's also been someone who has really also understood how much representation matters. So I'm very excited for this conversation. I consider him one of the really up-and-coming stars amongst all the mayors in the country, and really excited for this conversation. So happy to have you, Mayor Puraval.
Thank you so much. What's up, Asians? How we doing? Good morning. Good to see everybody. Can we give another round of applause for Neera Tanden? This is A-lister with us this morning. This is very exciting.
Great to be with you.
I'm looking forward to this.
I mean, it'll be fun back and forth.
Yes, I hope so. And I can't believe 3 White Houses. She looks like she's 25. This is incredible.
And now you know why he's a politician.
She got me.
A successful politician. So do you want to start off with any remarks?
Not really. No,
Okay,
no.
okay, great. Because, I always want to let people speak. So you were elected as the first Asian American mayor of Cincinnati in history in 2021. It would be great, really, if you could just share with people what that felt like, how you got there, what the journey was.
Yeah.
I mean, having an Asian American leader in Cincinnati is not maybe not the normal course. So
It's not.
So just share with us how that happened.
Yeah, so when I was running for mayor for the entire year, my ethnicity didn't necessarily come up that often because I was already a local elected official. And I ran for mayor in 2020. In 2015, 2016, that was kind of my entry into local politics in Cincinnati and in the state of Ohio. So it wasn't really, I kind of had dealt with the, ethnic name with the brown guy, right, who wasn't from Cincinnati. I had dealt with that a few years ago. But then on election night, when we had won, we won the same night that Mayor Wu of Boston won and Mayor Harrell of Seattle won. And all of these national outlets were writing these stories about this kind of watershed moment for Asian Americans in executive leadership because of trailblazers like Neera Tanden and that story about the White House staffers in the Clinton administration. Because of all that work of so many AAPIs before me, we have seen extraordinary gains, starting with the vice presidency, but certainly in the Senate, in the House of Representatives, in Congress, throughout the country in state legislative races. But for whatever reason, those executive positions, mayor, governor, et cetera, we had not broken through. And on one night, we broke through in 3 kind of large American cities. And while there's certainly better representation on the coasts, what was lost on me was that there were no Asian American mayors in the middle of the country. I'm not just the first Asian American mayor in Cincinnati, but the first in the Midwest. And all of these national news articles were coming out, and I was kind of embarrassed, frankly, that I wasn't aware of the historic moment of not just my election, but all of those elections. And it was really encouraging because, it felt so fulfilling. It felt like a proud moment. But what I'm particularly proud of is in Cincinnati, there's just not many people who look like us. The AAPI population in Cincinnati is 2.8%. So it's not like I was pushed into office on the back of this massive Asian mobilization. Like so many Asian politicians in the middle of the country outside the coast where there's not a lot of density, what I'm really proud of in that moment is certainly the representation, but also this idea that no matter what you look like or where you're from, the fundamentals of politics can transcend, your background and your ethnicity. And you don't just have to be an elected official on the coast. You don't have to be an elected official with a dense Asian population. You can be successful anywhere. And I think what Mayor Wu, Mayor Harrell, and I proved is really starting to take hold. The new mayor of Oakland, Asian American. In Akron, Ohio, just last night, in Akron, Ohio, a 20-something-year-old named Shamus Malik, Indian American, just won the primary to be the next mayor of Akron. Winning and winning the primary basically means he's very likely to be mayor. And so this change that is taking place at the executive level is really taking hold and starting to spread to the rest of the country. And to the extent Michelle Bruce and I had a small part in that, we're really, really proud.
Yeah, and I think that the point you make is really well taken, which is, as you can just sort of see in Ohio, you have your success, and then other people may feel, you basically widen the path for others, and that path gets widened to Akron. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
So I guess basically, if you could share with us, what inspired you to first get involved in politics and to run? I think one thing I've seen over the last 20 years, 25 years in Washington is that, like when I started in Washington, the Asian community, AAPI community was really a little recalcitrant about politics. A lot of us are first generation, our parents are first generation, and sort of maybe skewed us more towards traditional jobs.
My mom still hopes I make it to med school, so that doesn't go away.
Yeah, I hear you. But what drove you into go to politics and really inspired you to take that extra step of running for office and where you have to really put yourself out there in a community which, as you noted, doesn't have a large Asian American community.
Yeah, it's obviously really scary, but I'm speaking to the choir here, but immigrant families, right? My parents immigrated here in 1980. My mom is from Tibet. My father is from India. I have a Persian name. I'm 6'3", which is very confusing, but I'm all Ohio. So when you're a child of immigrant parents or just immigrant families, your parents are just always working, right? They are just always working because they moved here without knowing anybody, with having very little, so they had to work to earn everything that they had. And because of that financial insecurity, I think a stereotype, but was certainly true in my family, was my parents really wanted me to be a professional, to really have economic security for my generation and for the next generation. So education was so important. Politics was just this hobby, this interest. But without knowing it, my parents kind of unintentionally pushed me to politics and public service. My mom, being a Tibetan refugee, obviously it was very important to her because of her life story to understand what was going on in her government, understand what current events were going on. And because my dad was just constantly working, quality time with him was sitting in front of the TV watching the nightly ABC News with Peter Jennings, right? So we were kind of sit silently watching the TV together, but through that quality time with my dad, I got more interested in politics. And it was always a passion of mine. I ran for student council president. I was student body president of my college at Ohio State. But I never thought it was realistic for me to be in public service or an elected official, because I didn't necessarily see that, right?
Yeah.
I didn't see it out in front of me. I didn't see leaders who looked like me or had my name. And, outside of just my experience, if you have an ethnic name, if you have a foreign name, if you look different than your electorate, if you have an accent, the obstacles for getting into politics, the barriers of entry are just much higher. It is harder for us to be in politics because at its core, politics is about empathy. Right? Does this person in front of me, do they really understand my plight, my challenges, my hopes and dreams, and will they fight for me? And if you don't look like them, if you don't share their culture or their religion, there's an immediate obstacle that is hard to get over. And so I always thought it was a pipe dream until President Obama. Mm-hmm. President Obama is without question our first black president, but I view him as our first president with a foreign name.
Yeah.
And he really inspired me to believe that if I'm really, truly passionate about public service and transforming my local government, then it shouldn't matter and it won't matter what I look like or what my name is. If I work hard to uplift those communities, then I can have a place. Now, when I would ask other Asian elected officials, South Asian elected officials, how do you break through? I didn't actually get very good advice. And so my advice to you is to really try and focus on that empathy, right? Try to focus on what connects you, despite your differences, to your electorate. And what I used was self-deprecating humor. Because when I would tell people I wanted to run for office, they would say, there's no way you can run for office. You have to change your name to Al or to Adam, right? And so instead of running away from a perceived weakness, which was my name, and changing it, I decided to hang a lantern on it. So in my first race in 2016, I fundraised hard to get enough money to go on television. And I was running for the Hamilton County Clerk of Courts. So if you think fundraising for state ledge races is hard, try raising money for an office no one cares about or has heard of. But I got enough money to get on TV, and every time I said my name, a big yellow duck puppet would pop up next to me and repeat it in the Aflac voice, right? So not distinguished or dignified, but incredibly memorable, somewhat self-deprecating and winking. It was very, very successful, and ultimately I got elected. Now, in hindsight, I'm proud of that campaign because it was successful, but I wish that I didn't have to make light of my name. I wish that I could just run as Aftab Pureval and not have to bridge that divide. But the fact of the matter is that divide still exists, particularly in communities like in Ohio and elsewhere where the Asian population isn't as dense. But I'm hoping that because I have in some ways normalized Asian leadership, the next generation of leaders won't have to resort to those tactics.
Thank you. That is helpful advice, and I took notes. So, and I would also just share, I heard from so many leaders like you that if a person named Barack Hussein Obama could become president, then Aftab Purval, Sanjay Gupta, other people can actually become leaders themselves. So I really think it is a reminder of how much example matters for widening the path and how much your example will matter for others as well. So I also wanted to just turn to some substance or more issues. We saw during the COVID-19 pandemic a kind of a really tragic growth in anti-Asian hate. And I wanted to just ask you how those issues, COVID-19 itself, the pandemic, and the rise of anti-Asian hate, how did it affect your mayoralty?
Yeah, it's been devastating. Cincinnati and specifically communities of color have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. If you are a person of color, you were more likely to get COVID. You were less likely to get access to the vaccine or health care. If you're a person of color and you had a small business, it was more likely to shutter. So it was a devastating period, and we're still kind of digging our way out of that. Not to mention the exponential rise of AAPI hate, sadly. And historically in this country, and it probably is a factor for why we have so few executive leaders in the country that are AAPI. For generations, really since the country began, it has always been just fine to be racist towards Asians, right? I mean, we have data point after data point historically. The construction of the railroad, the internment camps, even more modern examples from our government, the Muslim ban in this country very recently. So of course, all of that pent-up rage, all of that normalized racism, we're seeing the tragic and devastating impacts of that through violent crime towards Asians. And certainly Cincinnati hasn't avoided that hate, sadly. And so in addition to all of the work that we've done to try and lift our communities, particularly our communities of color, out of the pandemic, spearheaded, frankly, by the Biden administration. And what I mean by that is the American Rescue Plan saved Cincinnati. Cincinnati would not exist. Our city would have failed but for the ARP federal dollars. Democrats across the country are being, particularly mayors are being, and the Biden administration are being hammered for crime in our cities. And this idea of Democrats are trying to defund the police. Well, in Cincinnati, we used a majority of those federal dollars to go to pay for our public safety operations. So it's Democratic mayors and it's the Biden administration that is actually funding police, funding fire, funding EMS, and making sure that our urban centers, which are our main drivers of our economy, the main places where people actually are employed, we use those dollars to really help Cincinnati survive. But in addition to that, I feel obviously a special responsibility to not just speak out about AAPI hate in Cincinnati and nationally, but also to use real dollars to intercept and intervene before and after that hate occurs. And in Cincinnati, we've been able to work very, very closely with our FBI and our U.S. Attorney's Office to investigate and to prosecute any instances of AAPI hate. And in order to make that more effective, we actually have a local community of people who are working with the FBI to understand cultural competencies, cultural sensitivities, in order to break through any barriers that may exist to bring these people to justice.
Excellent. So I guess I would like to ask, what is your biggest focus these days? What are your sort of hopes for the future? I won't ask you future ambition because, although I might ask privately, how do you see your priorities, and are there things that we should know in the Biden administration or in Washington that you're focused on?
Well, we're focused on getting the trillions of dollars of federal money that's available, and we've been very successful this past year. Cincinnati received the single largest federal grant in our country's history, $1.6 billion, to redo our Brent Spence Bridge, which is the main bridge that connects Ohio and Kentucky. 3% of our GDP goes over this bridge, so it is the poster child for the infrastructure bill. So in so many ways, the Biden administration is transforming our region. But look, all mayors in the country are focused on the same things. And it's the things that are most important to the electorate, and that is public safety, equitable economic growth, our climate, and housing. Every city is challenged with those four issues. And so when I think about my legacy, of course, I want to really move the ball on all of those initiatives. Every mayor inherits the city from the previous mayor, does the best that they can, and then entrusts it to the next mayor. And I'm really hoping in my chapter, I'm able to move the needles on those four. But what I really hope my impact is for Cincinnati is a little bit more ephemeral, and that is to really change the narrative about Cincinnati. I don't know what your perception is about my city, but I can tell you that you're wrong. Right? Cincinnati is no longer our grandparents' city. It's no longer, I guess there was a show in the 70s, WKRP or something like that. We are no longer this city that is behind the times, right? I mean, we are a thriving, dense, diverse city with swagger that is poised for incredible growth moving into the future. I mean, if I dropped you in the center of our city, you could walk to restaurants ranked in the top 100 in the country. You could walk to an MLS, NFL, Major League Baseball game. You could walk to a museum designed by Zaha Hadid, the renowned Iraqi architect, the first building designed by her in the United States. I mean, we are affordable in the national context. We have the third best children's hospital in the world, the largest consumer products company in Procter & Gamble, and the largest grocer in Kroger, all headquartered downtown Cincinnati, the best public high school in the state. I mean, we are poised for incredible growth. And it's not just rhetoric. Because of the CHIPS Act, Intel is making a $200 billion investment just 2 hours north of Cincinnati, the largest semiconductor plant in the country. And two of the reasons they chose our region is, number one, our access to fresh water, both the Great Lakes in the north and the Ohio River to the south, and number two, our region's climate resiliency. We are not seeing the wildfires or the droughts or the hurricanes, the catastrophic effects of climate change like other parts of the country. And so I am convinced that maybe not in the next 25 or 50 years, but there will be an inward migration. We're already seeing that. Businesses are already investing in anticipation of that. And Cincinnati is poised to be one of those climate refugee cities. And the investments we're making right now is to envision that growth and accommodate it effectively.
I'm ready to move to Cincinnati. So we have just a few minutes left, and I wanted to ask, you've provided actually so much wisdom already to the audience, but do you have any parting thoughts for particularly the young people in our audience, ideas for them?
Yeah, I mean, sadly, when you raise your hand and step into the arena and run, you are going to face racism. Every race that I have run in, I have faced racism. When I ran for Congress, one of the first posts on my announcement post was "Nice try, ISIS," right? Paul Ryan, his super PAC, funded TV ads calling me a Libyan terrorist. Nero was one of the few people to call that out as racism on Twitter. When I ran for mayor, these dog whistle attacks, he's not one of us, he's not from here. My point is this, there are going to be haters. There are going to be racists. It is going to be harder for you. It costs more money. It requires more work. It's nothing that you probably haven't already experienced. They are going to tell you that you're too foreign, that you're too female, that you're too brown, and all of that is crap. It's crap. I mean, my story is so unlikely. It is just insane that I'm even sitting here. I'm the son of a refugee, as I mentioned. My mom was born in Tibet and forced to flee. My parents and my mom, or my grandparents and my mom, made their way through the Himalayas, through Nepal, and into India, where she grew up as a refugee. She got an education, made it to college, where she met my father, who's from Punjab. The young couple got married, and they decided to come to the United States. So my dad looked at a map, and from sea to shining sea, from New York to California, this crazy man literally could have gone anywhere. And he chose Beaver Creek, Ohio. Just white people as far as the eye could see. So they get here in 1980. I'm born a couple years later. And my point is this. In one generation, my family went from being refugees to now a mayor of a major American city. And that story only happens right here in this country. So when people tell you that you have to change who you are, you have to change your name, you can't do or achieve the goals or dreams that you've set out, I dare you to prove them wrong. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
I think we're on time.
Yeah, we're on time.
Nice.
Thank you so much. And I think the next panel will be here shortly.
Thanks, guys.